briefly on my take this morning. In the midst of a lot of things that seem to go on in this country and we don't seem to get a grasp of them, is it really about the lack of laws? No, it does appear that it's about the lack of values in this country. For example, the registration, the process that has gone on as far as voters are concerned, the law is very clear that if you did anything like trying to register as a foreigner, or you try to register as a minor, or you went to the centers and by use of force or threat, prevented or attempted to prevent any person from exercising their right to register, if you were found guilty, you could go into jail for 2 years, and after that you could be prevented from voting for a period of 5 years, disqualified for taking part in any registration exercise, and by that effect also voting. So what exactly is the problem? A lot of these things were found, but who is being punished for them? Why do we, after all, not get a situation where these things will not be done at all? We have a constitution that's been violated all over the place, and courts give orders that are not respected. A very respected Professor Edward Kofi Koshiga, who is a dean of the School of Law of the University of Ghana, Legon, has said something that I think deserves attention. He gave his inaugural lecture on Thursday on constitution building, constitutionalism, and national values with Ghana. Constitution building, constitutionalism, and national values with Ghana. And this is just a bit of the abstract that I want to share with you. He says that experience has taught us that the existence of a constitution and the practice of constitutionalism are not necessarily the same. The existence of a constitution is a practical fact, but the practice of constitutionalism is essentially one of values demonstrated in actual practice. A person can strictly conform to the constitutional provisions and therefore be within the law, but at the same time operate completely outside of the expectations of constitutionalism. Constitutionalism, understood merely as a system in which the constitution limits the powers of government, is self-deception. Constitutionalism is a matter of values, values that clothe the bare constitutional skeletons and thereby make possible a system of government that would be truly representative, not merely because the people voted for it to win political power, but because it is operating according to the inherent values upon which the country is built, values that are known and accepted by all and are non-negotiable. These would form the standards according to which we could judge all of us, particularly those who exercise the powers of state. We have observed various governments exercise powers that otherwise were lawful, but which were without regard to the sensitivities of the generality of the people or the inherent interest of the fundamental principles upon which the nation is built. Examples exist in all of the various regimes Ghana has experienced. It is this attitude that brings us to the issue of values that must be developed to support the exercise by individuals of the powers of the state. And I read a conclusion that he comes to after making a lot of observations, that what we actually need is not a Constitution Review Commission, but a National Values Identification and Actualization Commission. This should be a commission that should work from the community level up to the national level to deduce the values that should become synonymous with being a Ghanaian. That commission should also work to ensure that those values are owned by Ghanaians. This is the way forward if the Constitution is to be understood and operated as a sacred charge to all Ghanaians, and according to which values can be according to which values we can sanction our political leaders and ourselves. Ghana needs a national idea. What values do we stand for, so that we can respect the laws of this country and not abuse them in the manner that we have seen? He makes examples of the Balogun case, where You know, there was a wrongful deportation of someone who was said to be not a Ghanaian, but found out maybe they would have been Ghanaians in flagrant disregard of a court order, just like something which happened recently. He made reference to the Salah case in which someone was wrongfully dismissed. The court says the government had a problem with that. The clipping off of the powers of the vice president in the constitution in the Rawlings regime. We just took all the powers away because the president had a problem with Kowaka. Also the reference to the Afre appointment to the Supreme Court, when obviously the government of Kufuor had lost the case and just wanted to be able to pack the court to make a point. We need values, not mere constitutional dictates. Thank you very much. I'll be sharing more of those with you in the coming days. I'm Samson Ladi Ayenini. Now, my guests are seated, and they are Abdul Malik Kwekubako. He is editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. Erica Metokwame is communications consultant, the NHIA, and member of the government communication team. Kweku Kwating is MP for Boasso West and member Finance Committee of Parliament. Isaac Adongo is financial analyst and NDC parliamentary aspirant for the Bolga Central constituency. We'll be joined on the phone by Isana Nankoma, who's a private legal practitioner and member of Occupy Ghana, to share with us some of the documents that have been brought forward. The Attorney General has handed some of the documents of the bus branding to Occupy Ghana, and they are serializing them and sharing some very bizarre revelations with members of the public. You get to find out a lot more soon. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Right. Our first issue we're going to deal with has to do with the president at the summit in London, World Anti-Corruption Summit, and the comments that he has had to make and the attacks that he's suffering presently. Many suggest that he failed the lie detector test. Kweku, what's our big deal with the president? He's repeated some of the things that we're already familiar with as far as his fight against corruption is concerned. He deserves to be credited for the things he has done in the area of fighting corruption. And if he comes up, the question comes up personal to himself and he responds in the manner he did, what's our problem with that?
Well, I don't, unless you have something contrary to what he said. We're talking of the person, the individual, relative to the specific question that was asked, whether he's taken a bribe before. If you have something contrary to what he said, and you brought it forward, something of evidential value, and you brought it forward, then we can begin to question the veracity of his answer. Otherwise, everything is left in the realm of speculation and, you know, the usual political thing, which I'm not about to do. It's different from asking whether his fight as president against the phenomenon of corruption has been effective. That whether he's displayed sufficient will and in fighting that thing, and whether we have achieved results that we can be proud of as a people. I draw a distinction between the two, because it's very difficult to proceed on the basis that, look, because he's a political opponent or I don't agree with him, A to Z, he's taking bribe. How am I going to advance any evidence to support that? So I really don't want to go into that
Typically,
direction.
when you are in the dock, when you're in the witness box and you're giving answers in a court or giving testimony, your demeanor plays a very important role.
And what was the demeanor? I haven't watched it.
What people, I just played it to you quickly.
Yeah, but I didn't watch.
Okay.
Don't you see? You
Okay.
have placed the
Okay.
TV in a way I can't even watch. So I was using my ears rather than my eyes.
Now, from what you heard, did he exhibit any posture that suggested that he had the hesitation and that should go to some account as his opponents accuse him?
He tried, well, that's what I think perhaps is providing ammunition for some people to raise issues of doubt. He asked whether as president, okay, so then another one, or as a human being. And then he makes the point that as a human being, throughout, and there, the context I get is that you are talking of throughout your public life, at least. So, and that's a long one.
That in fact,
No.
he doesn't attempt to answer the question directly until he's asked repeatedly to answer it directly.
A multitude of suspicions or deductions.
Does
will
not constitute proof.
Thank you.
You are quoting the Supreme Court.
Yes. So I'm being very careful. because we are judging here an individual. We are talking here of bribery and corruption. If I have to be categorical, I will stand on something very valid and strong. Right. I'm not about to do just because I want to satisfy a political or a personal interest. I must throw something out there and sustain it. I can't do that. I'm saying I'm prepared to look at the general picture of asking whether he, as president, has been able to fight with his government and the measures he's put in place have been sufficient in dealing with the phenomenon of corruption, and if the results are adequate in terms of pushing the country forward. That's the extension I want to draw. The individual one, look, Nana Akufo-Addo has also said that he's never been corrupt. Okay? It's the individual thing. Those who want to challenge him, unless you bring something to contest what he's saying, I don't think it's necessary to go in that direction. That's my own opinion. I'm not about to go in a direction where I cannot defend in a way. That's
what do you make
the
of the summit itself?
Now I say it's significant. We're being told of a global forum for recovery of assets. I presume stolen assets.
That's right.
Yes, and Nigeria, Ukraine, and with Sri Lanka have been mentioned. I'm sure there are other countries that will come on the radar soon, as soon as possible. You know, and I look at Nigeria in a classic sense. That's why I like the significance of this. Global efforts to fight corruption or to expose corruption didn't begin today. It's been there. Even Transparency International and all the rest are part of those pillars in this battle. But I recall this issue of Abacha's money, stolen monies, being a very long-standing matter. To the extent that at one stage, Ghana, we declared, and when I say so, I'm sure everybody knows what I'm talking about. We declared Abacha as a man of impeccable integrity. We insisted that Abacha had not stolen monies, he hadn't done anything of that sort. But gradually over the last few years, stories keep coming, showing colossal amounts of money Abacha stashed in foreign banks. If there's an effort between governments, businesses, law enforcement agencies, to identify, to locate, search, locate, and retrieve, as well as return such assets to the, countries who were victims of this kind of looting. Who says it's not positive? The question is whether there will be a consistency, whether there will be the will. Okay, that's the key point. But the idea, the principle, the project itself, I love it. I remember 1999. And that was not exactly in the same context, but President Rawlings wrote to the World Bank, requesting the World Bank to undertake a diagnostic survey on corruption relative to Ghana, in his effort to see, because there was the whole hue and cry about corruption eating deep into the system. And the World Bank did some exercise. It showed that, yes, it's deep-rooted here and all the rest. So global efforts are okay, they are welcome. Are we going to be able to succeed? And when I say so, I'm not talking of the jurisdictions. This is a global effort. So to be honest with you, I like the idea. I support it in principle. Look, if you take a look at Ghana, the M&J case, if you read the court proceedings Maybe and Johnson, the UK court proceedings will tell you that indeed a certain system of corruption was institutionalized relative to contracts in this country. Monies were paid into people's accounts in the UK. It's black and white. But when we decided to pursue that case, apart from our own legal challenges, domestic ones here, even in the UK, there were limits as to how much information they were prepared to disclose. Okay? They were prepared. Even the court system, you go there, they tell you a number of years have passed, so we can't give you all the information. Same with CANSEM. Okay. You go, the court proceedings is there. It points to the fact that the system was created within which CANSEM got the shares in GASEM. Okay? You proceed beyond that, you are told that, oh, there's a limit to disclosure. Or because a number of years that have passed, we can't give full disclosure. These are issues that create problems for us, even on the international level. So if there will be an effort to take away all those barriers and help to push forward the fight against corruption, that will lead to recovery of stolen cash, I think it will help. It will serve as a great deterrent.
Great. And you were saying, and you could tell us something briefly on that. You were saying also that if you had to respond to the question whether or not the president's efforts at fighting corruption have been effective, what would be your answer? Have they been effective?
Not in the real sense of the word. He's done something. I mean, if he talks about national service scheme, it's a fact. You can see it. If they ask some people to the recover
national service scheme, about 35 people who were put on trial.
Yes, even though there are problems there.
Out of that number, about I think 7 or so far have pleaded guilty and have been convicted.
Yes, there are positive things you can see, practical things. Aggregate, sufficient, I'm not too sure about that. It's also perhaps because the corruption in the system is so massive, it's big. So perhaps the efforts are good, but not good enough. We have to look at it. You see, the problem we have in this country and in our jurisdiction is that over the years, corruption itself has become like a football, you know, looking at it in terms of parties, governments, administrations. And so everybody is calculating. Maybe I scored 3, you scored 2. Now, when you do it that way, you have a difficulty in getting people to arrive at a consensus. Okay. That look, we are all together doing well or doing things put together that will advance the anti-corruption crusade. Right. That is one thing that if we are able to move away from, it will help. Okay. You understand? Rather than this allocation of points on basis of parties, administrations, and governments.
Right. Amato, what would be your response to the last question I asked Kweku about the effectiveness of the efforts of the government of President Mahama at fighting corruption?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and let me say good morning to all viewers this morning. See, the fight against corruption and its effectiveness. We, as a nation, as a people, have not done any empirical studies over the period to say that within this regime's existence, corruption has either increased or decreased. What we have sought to rely on is the Transparency International measurement of corruption, which they publish every year. And over the years, we have seen that as a nation, perhaps we are making progress towards fighting corruption. In 2008, our score was about 39%. Between then and now, we have gone to some 47%. So those who can measure corruption, and which the world accepts as a good basis for judgment, if they come out with figures which say that we are making progress, who am I to say that we are not making progress?
Not to government performance. Remember that.
Well, as a country.
That's a note, yeah.
As a country. That is it, because the nature
I think what particularly Kweku may be seeking to point out to you now is that the last results show rather that it is the pressure groups, the civil society that is doing a lot of work in that regard.
Have been quite damning.
It's okay, let's hear
let me say that the environment for institutions to thrive can be a contributing factor to whether we are making progress or not.
Right.
The willingness of the government of the day to actually cooperate with those institutions is also part of it. But what I would want to say is that in Ghana, in particular, corruption is a societal issue. And if you look at our culture, it tends to prod people on to do things beyond their financial capabilities. People tend, or institutions tend to recognize people who are in certain positions and who have made wealth without questioning how they made those wealth. The classical one is that we all say that when churches and certain institutions are organizing events, they invite people to come and chair. They invite people to come and be chairman supporters. They invite people to come and sit at the front pews. Do they ever question how those people are able to make their wealth? You are in a certain position in public office, and people of all sorts expect you to lead a certain kind of life, to have acquired a certain type of property within the span of your being in that public office. Are those not societal pressures that, you know, lead people on to do corrupt acts which bring them financial benefits in order that they can also be seen as having made progress in life? So these are things that we must look at. No matter how many laws you put in place, no matter what stringent efforts you make, if society itself is not ready to disown people who are seen to have been corrupt, or who they can question as to how you have been able to make your money, it makes fighting against corruption very difficult. And in this country, if we are to make progress against corruption, everybody has to be a part of that. And I agree with the president entirely when he says it might be a cooperation of the willing to be able to actually move this process of fighting corruption.
We've
forward.
had the Conduct of Public Officers Bill 2013
Exactly,
placed in Parliament for quite a while now. It's not been passed. That bill, you know, deals with improper enrichment and how to deal with receiving gifts, conflict of interest situations and all of that. You don't think that all of these contribute to what is actually going on, because people are enriching themselves and no one is questioning because there's no basis in law somehow to go question them?
Well, so you would say that that is an effort on the part of the executive to put in some legal measure to constrain people in public office from acquiring wealth.
Well, that bill was largely done by the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice.
But all bills originate from the executive.
That's fine.
So while we must begin to question why for this while, at least 2.5 to 3 years, that bill hasn't seen the light of day. The same thing can be said about the Right to Information Bill, which has traveled how many regimes? Two or three regimes? Two regimes so far.
Two parliaments.
And hasn't seen the light of day. So it needs the efforts of all institutions. It needs the efforts of everybody to be able to put in the legal regimes, the necessary structures, and the will to be able to propel the fight against corruption forward.
Are you satisfied at the president's response to Peter Kocha's questioning?
You see,
you ever taken bribe?
The discussion was not a yes and no answer, false or true kind of discussion which was going on. This is a person who has lived his life all this while, and you ask him, have you ever taken a bribe? And he said, as president, as the leader and the first gentleman of my nation, or throughout my life.
Or as a human being,
as a human being. First he said, throughout my life as president, as a person, and he said, yes, as a person. He said, no. The president has worked in different positions before he became president. He became member of parliament, he became a deputy minister, he became a minister, and he became a vice president before becoming president. So if he wanted to relay his experience, as somebody who probably encountered situations where he could have been compromised and he didn't, I don't think that it's something that we should say because he didn't say no immediately, then he had something to hide. I don't agree with that position.
I see. Thank you. Now, the president says that he doesn't engage himself, or he's not even involved in procurement activities and all of that, and so you don't even bring these things closer to him. He wants to indicate further how remote he is from the temptation of corruption, because it happens through procurement, and he says he doesn't see how these things are done.
That was misleading. I made a suggestion that he doesn't make decisions regarding procurement was very misleading. But
there are procurement authorities all over.
Yes, so but I'll come to that. But before I do that, good morning to viewers, especially to my constituent. Election is coming. We'll be engaging very much. I said what the president said was misleading because there has been evidence. Remember the West Blue incident, the letter written from the presidency to the finance minister directing that a certain company had to be procured and that they should take steps to get sole sourcing, even though the law is clear on the circumstances under which you can sole source. I'll be reading bits from that letter shortly. But I start by agreeing with Mr. Ametokwame Samson that if we want to fight corruption, we need to look at the culture. I mean, as a member of parliament, sometimes when people have made demands on me, left and right, everybody wants you to be at their funeral, and I hear all that. The question I ask is, so all that money, where am I going to get it from? And I think people have a tendency to be corrupt and selfish as human beings, but when there is pressure, then it becomes very difficult for people to stay clean. So I agree with that point Mr. Ametokwame made, that in a fight against corruption, we should not take our eyes off the fact that there could be things in society that will be putting pressure on those into whose custody we have placed public resources, and that we ought to be looking at those factors as well. And then I again agree with what my senior brother, Mr. Kukubaku, the point he made, that in the fight against corruption, oftentimes we have turned it into some political game. And even when there's a clear incidence of corruption and people complain, the response you get is, oh, but during that man's time, it was even worse. So it's almost to say, well, you did some to Ghanaians, and therefore this administration we will do some to Ghanaians, and then it will be 1-1 draw. That is again something we must watch. And this reference to we're all in this country when. And we are not allowed to discuss wrongs because it is captured in some kind of political game is worrying. But having said that, I think nothing should prevent us from examining the conduct of a president and his administration and saying that this is wrong, it should stop, and this must not happen again, it should not have happened. And I'll do that briefly, then you can move on. You see, if you look at the president, you ask the question, is this administration doing enough, or has the president himself been doing enough? If you look at the interview, I don't think the president's demeanor was right. I don't think it was right. There's a sense in which, yes, corruption happens not in the open. And because both the giver, both the giver and the taker are wrong, it won't come out. And even if it was leaked, both of them would deny because they are both wrong. So it was an interesting question. It wasn't a question that he was going to get any different answer. But yeah, these are journalists. When they ask those questions, they're looking at your body language. When the president, after the difficulty in getting the direct answer from him, and he pinned him down, the president then said no, and then he laughed. It was as though but what do you expect? It was, that laughter was, in my opinion, improper.
Psychoanalysis.
Yes, it was improper.
Psychoanalyst.
No, but when I said, but is this thing funny? It was almost to say, but well, as an African president, what do you expect? I think the president himself must go back to that interview, and if he has another opportunity to see whether he wants to deal with the matters more seriously, or he wants to give answers that people would read and say, this man had something to hide. I think his demeanor was wrong, but I agree again that it's difficult to say that on this occasion, this man took this bribe, President Mama, as a human being, or as a president took this bribe, and therefore you're pinning him down. And that is what makes it difficult for us to say whether he lied or whether he didn't lie. But
you are proud that at least when there is a mention of the fantastically corrupt African countries or countries, Ghana is not mentioned. And there was a discussion on Channels Television on Nigeria. And one of the panelists suggested that, well, if they were able to reduce their corruption to the level of Ghana, then Nigeria will be happy. Are you excited by such news?
Yes, as a Ghanaian, I'm proud when I get such positive news. But we have to understand that this global anti-corruption summit was more about cross-border corruption.
Right.
In addition to the point Kokubako made about stealing money and hiding it somewhere, there's also the issue of taxation, where people set up companies in areas where there are secrecy laws. So there's a company and the beneficiary owners cannot be disclosed by law.
Shell companies.
Good. And then those companies would come back. So government officials could go out, they form a company in those enclaves, and then they come back and do business with Ghana. And because nobody is able to know who the real beneficiary owners of that company are, they are given all kinds of concessions in Ghana. Now, that kind of transfer of money, plus what we have been calling transfer mispricing and all that, that was the focus.
Right.
And those countries where increasingly they are beginning to worry that there is a fertile domestic environment for that kind of global corruption to manifest, then they are the people that summit engaged, really. And therefore, if Ghana was not mentioned, yes, I'm proud as a Ghanaian, but it should not give us any hope that we, because of that, we have passed. As I would conclude with, if you look at the president's own conduct in that interview, I think it's fair to say he was not truthful. I have first indicated that when you say I don't make decisions regarding procurement, what it means is that the president knows that he ought not to make decisions regarding procurement. But I just put this out. On the 12th of May 2015, in respect of the Single Window and Risk Management System project, this is a letter written by the Chief of Staff, Mr. Julius Debra, Chief of Staff, to the Finance Minister, briefly. It says, I refer to the office's letter, and here they're referring to the Office of the President, to you dated 9th April 2015, and it goes on. The said letter conveyed to you, His Excellency the President's acceptance in entirety, the recommendations of the Ministry of Finance on the way forward for the establishment of the National Single Window Project. In pursuant to His Excellency the President's decision, you are directed to formally engage West Blue Ghana Limited to undertake the following services. And then it mentioned the service, you should take the necessary steps to secure the public procurement approval in order to engage. So the decision seemed to have been made before the procurement process that give it to this man. That is procurement. And if the president had forgotten, he ought to be reminded that on that occasion he was untruthful. And going forward, he should not be getting mixed up in procurement if he thinks that is wrong.
Okay, what quick reaction can you give to this? We have read this letter on this show before, on the heels of when Dr. Spio Gabra, the trade minister, wrote letters to some of the other entities there that Ghana was owing some debt, and then he wanted some of them to advance some monies in anticipation of being giving some extensions of their contract, so to speak. And all that was criticized as very bad, because you ought to go through a competitive process and not to seek to do some of these things. He's saying on this note, the president was untruthful.
Thank you. I would want Mr. Kwatin to read again the first couple of paragraphs of this letter.
It's not the letter in dispute.
I'm
sure it's
not the letter.
Public
no. It's not the letter. It's not in dispute.
Right.
I just want him to read the
first letter conveyed to you, His Excellency.
The first two.
I refer to this office's letter to you dated 9th April and reference this with the subject matter maiden meeting of the National Single Window and the Risk Management Committee. What about?
No, where you read that the president has accepted the recommendations of. I want that, please.
In pursuant to His Excellency the President's decision, you are directed to formally engage.
No.
Let me take the letter again.
I think you should go ahead and make your point.
No. Because he read something It wasn't
Is that
the president who has taken a unilateral decision.
It's okay.
It was a recommendation from
the Minister of
Finance, which the president accepted. So
please, let me read that, because
what you are saying is that the president is part of a procurement entity.
No.
So the Ministry of Finance need reference.
No.
Resort to the president or clearance from the president before they can engage.
What this means
approve procurement.
Mr. Metoka, let me, Samson, please,
Okay,
let me
ahead.
read that part, because I think he's respectfully, I think you're seeking to mislead those who are
the said letter I think that you are the one misleading the public.
Okay, let me just read it. The said letter conveyed to you, His Excellency the President's acceptance in entirety, the recommendations of the Ministry of Finance on the way forward for the establishment of the National Single Window Project.
Yes.
That is a recommendation. It's about the project.
Yes. So this
I'll talk about the procurement.
This is a project that the government wants to undertake. The committee has sat down. They have taken a decision and conveyed their decision to the president. What is the president to do? To just sit down and say nothing, or to convey his acceptance or rejection to the committee? And that is what he has done.
So when you read this letter in full,
the subsequent,
when you read this letter in full,
yeah,
does it tell you that the president is not involved in procurement, as he said to the BBC?
That paragraph has nothing to do with procurement. It has to do with a decision to go ahead with a certain project.
In pursuant to His Excellency the President's decision.
Yes.
Not the committee's decision.
Okay.
His Excellency the President's decision.
Yeah.
You are directed to formally engage West Blue Ghana Limited to undertake the following services.
Yeah, in conformance with the decision.
The decision was
the decision of the president that this project should go ahead.
The one I ask a question
that this project should go ahead. You are then directed. You are then directed. That paragraph says the president directs.
And they were further directed to take every step to secure the project.
Yeah, but somebody wrote this letter. Somebody wrote this letter.
This is the chief of staff.
Yeah, and he said you are directed.
And on behalf of the
if
president.
If it's the president who is directing him, you would have said that you are directed by the president. This paragraph did not say that.
Oh, so you're saying this was the chief of president?
This was the chief of staff who said you are directed.
Okay.
Did the president
wasn't writing? He wasn't writing for and on behalf of the president.
That is not what the paragraph said.
Interesting.
The paragraph said you are directed. Where the president accepted the recommendations of another committee on the project, he stated clearly that is the president has accepted this recommendation.
It's all right. We have
in this letter.
We have gone over this letter before.
Directed.
Right.
So the point I
conclude in some 30 seconds. Yeah.
30 seconds.
Go ahead.
The point I sought to make was that the president was getting involved with procurement. It was wrong. Now, the decision that my brother Metokwame wants to refer to is a decision for the project. Once the project is decided, you now have to procure somebody to provide some services. And I say that to say that engage West Blue and to go ahead and say that now go to procurement people and get sole sourcing clearly demonstrated that this was wrong. And now that Mr. Metokwame is saying that it was not the president that directed and that we should be asking the chief of staff, the question we really ought to be asking is that a president fighting corruption, your chief of staff writes this letter. Has he withdrawn the letter? But something, if I can...
But the chief of staff did not say. He said, follow the correct processes.
Look, I think viewers have...
The letter says, go to public procurement and do what you have to do.
What the president should have said was that the project...
Okay.
Go
to public procurement and do what you have to do.
Allow me to...
Do you sincerely expect that if there is a letter such as this from the Ministry of Finance, a letter to from the Ministry of Finance to the presidency, and then the presidency writing this on the 12th of May 2015, writes back and says that you are directed to secure this, do you expect that there can be a different outcome?
I expect the agency to do exactly what they have been directed to do. Go to the public procurement board.
So there's no more discretion.
What you have to do.
There's no more discretion.
But this is public procurement. So where do they have to do?
I think something you have to let me finish. Well, I think if the president, if there was a need to write any such letter at all, the letter should have been, this project has been decided on. Please go through procurement process and select somebody. You don't mention a company and then ask them to go to procurement. It was pointless. But I think readers, viewers have heard the letter and they can make their own decision whether it was interference or not.
Okay.
But the president finally, just to this quick point, the president made references to the national service and the issues that happened there and the steps he has taken. You see, the national service and those involved, they are small fries, are they not? These are not politicians. They are not close to
they are not small. Some of them owe like 80,000.
Yeah, in terms of the money,
owe beyond that amount of money.
The question, what I'm saying is that the SADA issues, the several incidents of corruption that we have seen, the Woyomi, the people who paid Woyomi the money. Government says, the governmental report says, the commission said that the payments were dubious.
The committee.
Now, the people who made those dubious payments, where are they? They are all sitting there. They are part of the ruling party. And the president wants to turn around and say that just because...
There's a Buga Pele who is facing court.
Well, there are 8 years. We ought to have some conviction. 8 years. What's happening?
When you go to court, it is due process that has to go on.
Exactly. So,
but if 8 years for 8 long years, for all these big cases, we are not securing any conviction. I don't see the fight against corruption unless we decide that Ghana we are not. So my final comment is on the. I know we'll be discussing the Smarties, but that small bit that relates to the president's own conduct. You know, this Smarties report, the report by the Attorney General. We elect people, put them in office. We pay taxes, we give it to them to run the affairs of this country. Something like this has happened. You have set up a public desk to look into the matter. They are finished with their report. Let's see the report. You say, I will not let you see it. Then you say, I am fighting corruption.
We'll get there. We'll see how Occupy Ghana intends to surmount that, because they have been giving the documents, except that particular document, on some legal basis. Let's see what their answer to that legal basis will be.
If you may oblige me. You are a lawyer. You go to court.
Yes.
Every time. If a party goes to court and makes a specific demand from that court, and they are obliged, should the one who is now performing...
Are we discussing Smarties?
No. I just want a quick answer. Is the one who has to give the information go over and above what has been said to give what you didn't ask for?
Thank you very much. We'll get there. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, look, this is UK that is spearheading this global effort to seek to make sure that stolen monies are given back, or these monies are not hidden. If you've heard about Jeffrey Sachs, he has some comments to make, including the fact that he says that the UK is at the center of this network of impunity, a legacy of the British Empire and a measure of the continuing role of the City of London in transferring tax-free funds around the world. The British Virgin Islands, a UK overseas territory, has a population of 28,000 people and more than 1 million registered companies, roughly 35 companies per resident population. It is by far the most popular tax haven of the Panama Papers companies. Recent estimates hold that the British Virgin Islands host about 479,000 active companies. In short, what he's saying is that the UK and the US should not be the ones leading any such crusade. And what's his name? David
Cameron.
No, there's this other gentleman. I'll remember his name shortly. He was a former ambassador who is saying that the UK itself, these things makes that country stink. That Westminster stinks, and that they ought not be the ones seeking to lead this process. Do you agree? That if they are stealing money from Africa or anywhere that comes to you, you are the ones who are providing the fertile grounds for these monies to be hidden.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning to your cherished viewers, and good morning to my people in Boga, Tanga Central. I think, for me, corruption as a global issue requires that both the countries that are actively engaged in this and the countries that are bleeding as a result of this do come to some understanding that there's something that has to be done. And so if the UK, we all agree, is one of those countries that provide safe havens, the British Virgin Islands, Switzerland, and all those countries are providing the environment that allows this to happen. And therefore, by opening up to such discussions, they are invariably asking us to give us the opportunity to then raise these issues and to see how we can agree a global architecture to deal with this. And so it is a very good step in the first place for them who have created some of the systems that have encouraged this to want to be on board. But of course, it means that the world is beginning to open up, and the world is beginning to question the very systems that these countries have performed over the years. And we in Africa and other parts of the world do believe that we don't even need aid from anybody. We don't even need donor support. If a quarter of the monies that are taken from us and stashed in those countries can be recovered and can be stopped, who have enough resources to develop the continent. And we know that there are billions of dollars that are finding their ways out of tax evasion, out of inappropriate pricing, out of money laundering, and some of these shell companies that are bleeding most of the poor countries. And so if the big countries would be willing to accept and to be allowed to be investigated further in order to come up with a system that will ensure that this is eliminated, then that will be well and good. But at the end of the day, I do believe that the global system, by that I mean the United Nations, for instance, should be a key partner in spearheading this process, using its own knowledge and experience through the other institutions such as the World Bank and the IMF and the rest, to try and come up with a system that will ensure that resources are properly protected in Africa and corruption globally is made difficult to come by. But I think that we need to bring this discussion also to focus on...
What some ask is that if they are really serious and they are the places where the stolen money is heading, they should just go ahead and, as it were, return the monies. When the question, it came to Buhari, his country was also labeled as fantastically corrupt.
Yeah, exactly.
When the question was asked whether he was going to demand an apology, he said, I'm not interested in an apology. All I need is you are the one keeping the money. Release them to me.
Yeah.
There are a lot of Nigerians who have properties in the UK and elsewhere that they cannot show how they got the money legitimately to keep those there.
Yes.
Of course, there are some Ghanaians too. There are those who have legitimately, made money and, are doing business there and have acquired properties. But there are others too that you just clearly cannot tell how they came by those monies.
Yes, so what I'm saying is that before a summit like that would take place, it will mean that there have been years of some research to come to a conclusion that there has to be some change in the way the global financial system is working. There has to be some reforms to ensure that the countries that are bleeding, get respite from these countries. And so for a country like Switzerland, we all know what happened to FIFA. FIFA was like an island of its own. But all of a sudden, the Swiss government opened up. And it's one of those countries that is heavily involved in these safe havens.
Right.
But today, they are exposing organizations that are even resident in their own country, and they are beginning to share information across the globe. And that is the reason the US was very active in pursuing some of these people. And we know now FIFA is almost dismantled. You can see even in the UEFA that Platini is struggling. And so the fact that there is some wind that is blowing, and that wind is necessitating a lot of changes that are taking place. And the people who have championed this exercise, particularly the UK, the US, and other such countries, if they begin to get involved, it makes it easier. But if they begin to pull back, and we, the people who are struggling, are the ones making noise, how do we get to the bottom of the issue? And I do believe that at the end of this, we should come up with a clear action and commitments that would ensure that these monies are retrieved, that would ensure that future activities of that nature are curtailed, and that would ensure that countries that have suffered over these years not only would have monies returned to them, but will be adequately compensated in order, because you can't keep $1 billion for several years and return $1 billion to me. And so they must be properly compensated for the loss of investment opportunities that would have occurred in the countries of origin of those funds. And we know in Africa, and particularly in Ghana here, that our infrastructure deficit is very huge. And if you had invested those monies to improve infrastructure, you would have had some competitiveness within our economy, and most of our companies would have been doing better, our services would have improved, and the country would have grown faster than it is growing now. And if you look at countries like Nigeria, where you are dealing with figures that we cannot even imagine, then it tells you the magnitude of the problem. But I would like to respond to a few other issues relating to corruption that has happened here. I think, for me, the issue with the president, I do know that if my good friend Kogu Kwatin was asked the question, have you ever taken bribe? No. Being a politician, yeah, you will say no. But you see, we are in a country where people every day, okay, are saying so many things about corruption, about politicians. And so when you are asked the question, the first answer, the first thing that comes to your mind is, would they even believe me? Okay, would they even believe me? That is a major challenge even to politicians and to public servants, that immediately you are asked the question whether you've ever taken bribe. Even if you have never taken, the first question is, will they even believe me? And so you are a bit hesitant even in giving your answer, because you are not too sure how they will take it. So that already affects your psyche in trying to answer the question. So your demeanor may not be influenced by your natural self and what you really are, but may be influenced by what is it that you think the people out there are hardly going to receive the information.
The people out there,
yes.
You may be hesitant also because the people out there
Yeah.
know maybe how much you were worth before you got into politics.
Yeah.
And within 4 years or less, what you have been able to do physically,
And yes.
they have seen some
For
of the things.
for the president, what
And they can
was he
tell-
worth and what is he worth
and
now?
they can tell
Yes.
that this must be money that was stolen.
I agree.
But-
But there are also
but-
those who have gone into, who are in politics. They've left politics and they are back where they belonged. And people look at them and say, wow, you were in politics for 8 years and we are pushing your car along the road. It happens. We have people like that. And if you put a question like that to such a person, because of the group of people that he belongs, he would hesitate, because he will feel they won't believe me anyway. And so that has a bearing. But on the direct question as to whether or not the president has done well in fighting corruption, I think we all do agree that there is a bigger challenge. And that bigger challenge will confront any government in Ghana in terms of fighting corruption. But we need to look at what are the systems and the processes.
The president has a certain expectation of his ministers and appointees and other public office holders.
Yeah.
When he signed on to the Code of Conduct for Ministers and other appointees in 2013, this is the preamble to that document. And I just want to read just one paragraph to you. He says, it is declared that high moral and ethical standards, and ethical standards among government and other public officials are essential to the conduct of trustworthy, efficient, and accountable government, that the president believes that a code of ethics for the guidance of government and other public officials will help them avoid conflicts between their personal interests and their public responsibilities, will improve the ethical and functional standards of ministers, and promote as well as strengthen the faith and confidence of the people of Ghana and the international community in the government of Ghana. Why is it that in the midst of this, having brought about this code of conduct and put out clearly that these are the expectations, in fact, when you flout it, as in influence peddling, as in seeking to influence people to get a job, taking a gift which is more than 200 Ghana cedis, when you take a gift which is more than 200 Ghana cedis without approval from the president, you could suffer a whole lot of things, including that the president will ask you to resign. I'm sure that is what the president followed when he came to Jifar Ativo, for example,
we don't know
asking
for sure.
to resign.
We don't know
this is the edict. So I'll use that against what he did.
Did she take a gift?
No, I'm not saying she took a gift. I'm saying the sanctions that you suffer include being asked by the president to resign. And we can see an example there. Why is it that these things were done, but still the president believes that it is the discussion of the corruption and not the real corruption that is giving rise to the perception that there's a lot of corruption in this country?
You see, what is the real corruption? I mean, at the end of the day, the real corruption are those that we have found the evidence after investigation. You found the evidence and you can pursue them. That is real corruption. The rest are perceptions. You cannot run away from that. As we speak, you don't know for sure that Gifty Ativo was asked to resign. You don't know for sure. But you are speculating that she was probably asked because of the code of conduct. And I'm saying that this feeds into the perception. It feeds into the perception because somebody listening out there will think that she was asked to resign because a misconduct was leveled against her or was found against her. And I'm saying that...
You don't think that it is rather an indictment of the government if it is the case that she voluntarily took a decision and the government that has sworn to sanction such people by these means didn't take any action?
No. The actions that were taken, do you have any direct knowledge that Gifty Ativo as a person directly benefited or acted improperly?
I don't care about that.
No, you need to care because you want to deal with somebody.
Is this. What I care about is that the contract was over-bloated by excess of 1.5 million Ghana cedis.
That is agreed.
Okay?
Yes.
And she supervised that.
Yes. So she as a sector minister, decided to take the responsibility and resign.
Okay.
Are you getting the point? Now, beyond that, you
government doesn't do anything
beyond that, you must then be able to prove that not just because she was the sector minister and should have known and should have made sure that this didn't happen, she directly benefited or directly interfered with the process leading to this. Then you have a valid case to pursue her.
Okay.
But if I sit there at the top, something is happening at Joy FM, assuming that we engage in some unscenery behavior here, and your boss decided, look, I should have managed this properly, and I have resigned. She's not resigning because she was here fighting anybody, but she's resigning because she feels that this is not what she wants to showcase to the world.
I'm telling you that from where I sit, the contrary is an indictment of the government.
No, I don't.
If people are doing wrong, and you will not do anything to them, but allow them.
Wrong.
Wrong has been proven. Wrong has been proven.
Against her. I mean,
wrong
against her.
Has been proven.
Against her?
Of course.
What is the wrong she did?
She's the one who supervised this.
And I'm saying she's taking responsibility because she's the head.
1.5 million.
Yes. And you can prove that she directly benefited or...
I don't want to care about that.
You need to care.
Thank you.
Because you are dealing with somebody.
All I care about is that the taxpayers' money...
But let me make certain points. Let me make certain...
Is it oil funds?
We are moving into
that. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
But on the corruption matter, there are quite a lot of issues that you've not made me address.
Which one?
Particularly in relation to this West Blue matter.
Okay.
When the president says that he's not involved in procurement, it doesn't mean that the president has nothing to do with procurement. In fact, the president is the key person who holds the national purse and has delegated his ministers to do that on his behalf. And so he is, by implication, the one managing all the funds that are being procured and spent in this country. So if you want to engage in a certain activity at a certain level, and you find some oversight responsibility entrusted to the president in the procurement law? Not the procurement itself, but what I'm saying is that if you want to engage in an activity and you've sent a recommendation to the president because you feel that the president must clear this, and the president within the procurement, listen, but within the project, you see, within the project, there are deliberations around how do you ensure that we're able to meet certain timelines? Because don't forget that the destination inspection companies, their contracts were expiring. And we needed not to have a vacuum. We needed to be ready by the time that their contracts were expiring to ensure that the process continues. And there was a decision, even at that point, to get the Customs Division of the Ghana Revenue Authority to take charge. And so there were some urgent decisions that needed to be taken and that needed to be cleared.
Are you sure about this?
Yes, exactly. you needed
Okay,
to clear that.
thank you. I think we should move on
That is
from
the
there.
point. So
Right.
it doesn't mean that the president
He
just
should never
got
have
up.
mentioned West Blue in this letter. He should never.
No, I don't agree.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Kwekubako says there are big problems with the West Blue thing, and so he should rather keep some silence on that issue. Well, we will take a quick break. When we return, we'll find out whether Nana Konadu was correct when she suggested that the government is either a thief or not wise, or both a thief and unwise on the issue of the $250 million saga.
This word on why side.
We'll be right back.